Well, good morning. If you're watching this, it probably means you are ready to move on to the next thing we have for our class, and means you've gotten your research paper done, and the next thing then is to create in LibreOffice either a newspaper or a brochure. The assignment you can find on Moodle, and under that you'll find all the requirements for this project. Now the purpose of this project is to get you to use some slightly more advanced formatting to have a document that has some pretty extensive formatting, has columns, has pictures and graphics, has hyperlinks. And so we're going to walk through kind of how to do each of those things, but I'll reiterate, for everything that you do in everything that I do in LibreOffice, there's probably 5 other ways that we could probably do the same thing. Now you can do either a brochure, do it in landscape form, and do 2 sides to it, like 2 sides of a brochure, 3 columns, something you would fold over, or you can do the newspaper and do it like 11 by 17 size. For this video, I'm just going to do the 11 by 17. So we'll start by opening up a new text document, and I'm going to, let's see, maximize this so I can see it a little better. Our first step, of course, is to make our page 11 by 17. And that's fairly simple. We format the page. If you're doing the brochure, you do the same thing. You leave it 8.5 by 11, but then you format it to landscape. But I'm going 11 by 17. And for a project like this, it's probably nice to have narrower margins, so I'm going to go 1/2 inch on each of my margins. When I do that, my page is kind of big, so I'm going to shrink my view down a little bit. So, first step done. The next step, of course, is going to be a headline or a title. For a newspaper, that's going to be a big, I'll call mine the Staper Times. That's going to be a big title I want across the middle. So I'm going to center it. I'm going to probably change the font size and make it pretty big. Let's try 60. I'm actually going to go even bigger. I might want to make it bold. I might want to do a few other things with this style. You can format the character, and you can add some font effects perhaps to make it look nicer. Maybe you want to outline or shadow, or outline and shadow. I don't know. But you can play around with that to make it look nice. You could, of course, you could do this other ways as well. You could use word art or things like that. Then, by default, mine right now is set on double spacing. I don't want double spacing, so I'm going to go in, I'm going to change that. Instead of double spacing, I'm going to go single spacing. I'm going to hit return. I'm going to clear my formatting, so I'm back to 12-point font Times New Roman. Now, every newspaper I've ever seen normally comes in columns, so that's kind of the next step. But I'm intentionally going to make a mistake here so that you can see what common problems are. If I go format and I go to columns and I put in 3 columns, you'll notice that my title also went into 3 columns. In fact, LibreOffice does a nice job of kind of displaying where my 3 columns are. Or you can hit this little paragraph and it shows that little paragraph symbol, and it shows non-printing characters but formatting characters, so you can kind of see your format. And I see I've got 3 different columns and my title got thrown into that. I obviously don't want that. So I'm going to undo that. And I think the easiest way to do this properly, I'm going to actually go find an article, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put this into columns. Now if you're doing a brochure, you probably want to do columns before you even bother to put your title in, but for the newspaper I want that title to stay out of the columns. So I need some stories. I'm going to find this story. In fact, I've already highlighted it. This is from the Tigers game last night. So I'm going to copy it. This is the only assignment you'll ever get where your teacher tells you to plagiarize. Copy and paste. When you paste, I would suggest doing the paste special. because then you can do it as just unformatted text. Oops, I screwed up and I have just the URL there, so let me try this again. Highlight, paste special, and there you go. It's got just the text. I'm going to go through and I'm going to edit it and make it look nice. Like, I'm going to get rid of the recommended tweet thing. I'm going to get rid of the video tags that were there, and this is really my article. And then you'll also see I probably will end up going through, and I'll do this in a minute, and adding some returns. So just formatting the text so it looks nice. But now I need to put this into columns. So now if I highlight just the stuff that I just put in, and I go Format to Columns, notice now I can apply it just to the section. I'm going to go to 3 columns, and I can either do evenly distribute or not. If I evenly, well, let's do it both ways. If I evenly distribute it, they're going to stay in 3 columns, and it's going to be nice and even at the bottom of my 3 columns. If I want to, I'll undo that. If I want those columns to go all the way to the bottom, then I'll choose 3, and I won't evenly distribute them. By default, the spacing here is 0, so I'm going to actually add a little bit of space in between each of my columns. And I also really like it when they add a line. Again, these are stylistic preferences, but I'm going to put those in, and that gives me columns like that. So I should turn my title to bold. I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to add a couple returns to make this look a little bit nicer. But at the end of the day, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to go, you know, this is a nice article, but it'd be a little bit nicer if I had a picture in it. Right now it's kind of boring. So again, I'm going to plagiarize and I'm going to copy and paste pictures. So I found a nice picture of the tigers. I'm going to copy the image. I'm going to just put it in right here. So Command V is paste. Now by default it does a nice job of sticking it into the fitting it in my column. But if I shrink it down, again, it's also kind of a nice default setting, but it will do that wrap text for me. If it didn't do that, I would have to change the wrap. Right now it's doing the optimal page wrap. If I wanted it some other way, I might have to change that wrap. The other thing that I'd like to do, if I double click on it, it gives me that picture editing menu. I could also right click on it to get to this, but I like to add some borders. Because this picture doesn't otherwise have any borders, you may or may not want to do that, but I added a nice little border for me. So let's go back and look at the requirements and see what I've done so far. I changed my page size. I have a title. I have some columns in there. I have some graphics with nice text wrapping. I'm going to need multiple stories. The minimum would be I need 3 for the newspaper. For the brochure, you're probably going to want a different topic on each of the different pages of your pamphlet. But right now I've got one story that takes up 2/3 of my paper. I don't want that, and that's why there's really this other requirement. We put hyperlinks to the sources. We can do what we would normally do in a paper, which is not have the entire story all on. There we go. I'm going to delete out some of this story. I would not have the entire story on just the front page. You know, a lot of times you'll see in the paper it says like continued on B2. Oops, B2. Oopsies. I don't want continued on B2 on that next line. So let me put that back here. What we're going to do is we're going to just put in a little link that says like continued here for the rest of the story. And you're actually going to turn this into a hyperlink. you want the words continue here to be a link to your source. One of your requirements in the assignment is that you have a hyperlink to each of your sources. So I want it to go to this website, so I'm going to copy that website, but I don't want to see that down here. I don't want to see that whole scores.espn.go/MLB/recap ? Blah blah blah. What I want is just the words continued here to be the link. So what we're doing is we're making some nice looking hyperlinks. So to do that, I'm going to type the words I want to actually display. I'm going to highlight them, and then I'm either going to click the hyperlink button here, or I'm going to go insert hyperlink, and then I'm going to paste that URL as my target. I can close that, and now the words continued here are actually a hyperlink to my source. Now I can add another story. I can come over to the next column and add another story, or to the next column. If you decided though that perhaps, you know what, actually I want to end it here and then continue, I want this story to continue up here, you could do things like insert column break. Column break just ends one column and starts the next column. So we could push the rest of the story over there. The only issue with that then is how do we can continue on down from here, but how do we get back to this area over here? We can't really type in there anymore. And so for that, you might want to use text boxes. In fact, for a lot of this, you might want to use text boxes. If you've never used text boxes in LibreOffice, you may not have your drawing toolbar displayed, so you're going to want to make sure you go View to Toolbars to Drawing, because that'll give you the option to select and create a text box. So I could create a text box. I could do this just about anywhere, but I could put that in there, and I could post another story in that section. Well, I'll make that bold. So let's look back at the instructions here. We got to have at least 3 stories, so we got to have multiple stories with hyperlinks. We check the text for errors. That pasting special helped us there. We've seen how to use text boxes. When we're done, the last step then is simply going to be to export it directly as a PDF. Now if you don't finish it, obviously you're going to want to save it, and because we have a lot of formatting in this, you may want to save it as an ODF, just to be sure LibreOffice saves all your formatting properly. But when you are finally finished, export it directly as a PDF, or you can go File to Export as PDF, and then you're going to submit that PDF, that final published version, on Moodle for me. As everything, I've shown you how to do it in this case, but there are so many different ways to do the same thing. I'm going to leave it up to you to kind of play around with it and figure out how exactly you want to do each of these steps. Happy newspaper making!